We probably all put a property on a C# interface at some point. So is that good or is that bad? Well, for context, I recently released a video where I made a C# interface that only had properties. And as a result, I got a few comments saying that properties on interfaces in general are not good. And I got a little bit worried. Is this bad? Should I not be doing this? But I ended up doing some research, thought about it, so let's talk about it. First off, I wanted to empathize with people who were saying that properties on interfaces were bad. And the big argument that some people had were that having properties on interfaces forces the implementer to represent state in a certain way. Overall, I didn't quite understand this argument because properties in themselves don't represent state, they're just used to access state. And I think people were confusing this with fields, which literally represents state. For example, I could have a person interface with a full name property, but this property in itself isn't enforcing how implementers structure the full name. For example, one implementer could have two separate fields, one for first name and one for last name, and the full name property just puts those fields together. Or maybe another implementer literally has its own full name field that already has the first name and last name put together. In other words, this property alone isn't enforcing any structure of data. The other complaint that people brought up is that an interface should represent behavior. And the argument here is that a property isn't behavior, it's just a getter or setter to some sort of data. This complaint does make sense to me, so you should definitely try and model your interfaces to represent behavior so that you can keep things abstract and the implementer can implement the interface however it wishes. However, as always, context matters. So for instance, the video where this idea came from, the context was validation. And in this scenario, there wasn't really any quote-unquote behavior. The behavior in this context was we needed the interface to expose some properties that we could validate. So in other words, the context was literally getting data, which is a good use case for properties. Plus, as we modeled with the previously mentioned person interface, a getter property could technically represent some behavior, such as putting a first name and a last name together to represent a full name. So with those arguments in mind, let's talk about why I think it is okay to put a property on an interface. Remember, at the end of the day, an interface is just a contract. Now, if your consumer of an interface literally just needs to get or set some kind of simple value on the implementer of the interface, and that's really all the contract entails, then a property is a good use case. It fits the needs of the contract. Additionally, if the properties on the interface can't be, or shouldn't be, extracted into a more abstract behavior, then just stick with properties. If properties on interfaces were so bad, then we wouldn't see them quite often on official .NET interfaces. So in summary, don't be afraid to add properties on interfaces, do use interfaces to define necessary contracts between code, and don't blindly follow best practices.